Welcome to another episode of As Recommends. Today we will talk about a very famous album. It's Sign of the Times by Prince, often regarded as one of the very greatest albums of all time. You always see it in like top 100 lists of critic lists, often even in the top 50 or even top 20. But I'll do kind of lots of introducing here, so I'm gonna do a small, short introduction to Prince, the artist, then the album itself and the critical reception and things like that a little bit. And then also I'm going to talk about my history with Prince, which is kind of long in a way. But yeah, I'll start with Prince. So he was, of course, born in 1958 and he died in 2016. And he is kind of known for being a very kind of multi-talented person, as he was a singer, a songwriter. He played many different instruments. And he was also a producer and an actor, so he was just one of those people who could do it all. And that's one of the things I think people love him for, that he had this kind of big vision and he was kind of able to really bring it to the table himself, as he was kind of responsible for most of the elements in his albums, or at least many of his albums. And he, of course, has this like very flamboyant and androgynous persona with a very interesting like vocal range that we really see in this album as well. And he's one of those like very eclectic artists. So his music, again, tackles many different genres like funk, R&B, rock, soul, new wave, synth pop, jazz and blues, and even a little kind of early hip hop sound. And he also pioneered what is called the Minneapolis sound. And of course, his most famous and popular album is Purple Rain, which I really love too. But often there are many critics who think that Sign of the Times is the greatest Prince album. But then I guess like the casual fan would always say that Purple Rain. And even with critics, it's kind of really divided, that some people say Purple Rain, some people say Sign of the Times. And I think myself, I maybe like Sign of the Times just a tiny bit better, but I do really love both of these albums. So Sign of the Times is his 9th studio album. It's from 1987. And it's one of these like big kind of maximalist pop albums of the 80s. And I really love 80s music, lots of 80s pop music. And this was his first kind of solo album after he disbanded his kind of band, The Revolution. And many of these songs were again recorded during 86 and 87. And this is very much known for the use of the Lean LM1 drum machine, which we'll talk about. That's actually one of my kind of small criticisms towards this album, is the sound of the drums, but I'll get into it more later. Then he also used the Fairlight CMI synthesizer. And then there are also many like actual instruments here. And of course, this is an 80-minute long album that kind of goes through so many different genres of music, again, from funk to soul to kind of psychedelia and electronic and rock music. So when you go from song to song, you hear like lots of different things. And again, commercially, this wasn't one of Prince's most kind of popular albums back in the day, even though it made like the Billboard list, but it peaked at number 6 and not like number 1. But it's certified platinum, I think, in both UK and US and in some other countries as well. But even though it's not as commercially successful, like I said earlier, it's often regarded as one of the greatest albums of all time by many like publications, and you won't really see albums that have more acclaim than this. Yeah, it's just up there with like the Beatles and Stevie Wonder and those like most acclaimed albums you can find. And yeah, and then again, to go a bit more into the critical reception, like there are some like, again, there are lots of these like star ratings on Wikipedia, and then some interesting critical commentary about it. Like I'm trying to find some of it here. So So, for example, one comment here says that this is kind of like the most complete example of the artistry of Prince, because it again shows so much of his different styles in a one album. And there's like pretty much all of these publications gave it like 5-star rating, and at Metacritic it's at 99 out of 100, which is one of the highest I've ever seen. Insane rating there. And yeah, so there are lots of obviously highlight songs here. My personal favorite is probably Adore, but the singles from this album were Sign of the Times, the title track, which opens the album, which is a very pretty famous song and has a great beat. And then If I Was Your Girlfriend was the second single, You Got the Look was the third single, and then I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man was the fourth single. But yeah, I guess that's it for the intro. It was a bit long-winded, but I guess I mean one more intro I had to do is that my own journey with Prince. So I kind of heard Prince for the first time as a kid, as my father was playing him all the time when I visited him. And I think he had like recorded some VHS tapes where he had like music videos and stuff, and there were some like Prince music videos. But back then I didn't really pay that much attention to Prince. It was kind of just on the background, and I didn't really, like years after that, didn't really listen to Prince myself or really remember what he sounded like. But I just remembered that he was one of my father's favorite artists, along with like Michael Jackson and Queen, for example. But then again in my 20s, like a few years ago, when I kind of got out of my metal elitism and jazz elitism and things like that, when I started exploring like the history of pop music in a very kind of all-encompassing way, I of course came across Prince again when I was looking at these greatest albums of all time lists, and then I listened to some of his famous albums like Sign of the Times and Purple Rain and 1999, and liked them quite a lot when I kind of first got back into Prince a few years ago. But I didn't listen to those albums that much, and they didn't like become instant favorites. But then a couple of months ago, again during this summer, when I've been listening to lots of different music and I've been going back to some of these big classic albums, Prince kind of finally clicked with me more now, and now I consider both Purple Rain and Sign of the Times like favorites of mine, although I think I still need to digest these albums more, because even though this is pop music, there's so many different elements here, and of course this album is so long, so there is so many different styles here, so there is so many things to kind of unpack with an album like this. But I've maybe listened to this album maybe 7 or 8 times during this summer period, the last couple of months, and the more I listen to it, the more I like it, and I think it deserves the one of the greatest albums of all time title, even though I have some small problems with it, like I kind of alluded to a bit earlier. But that's kind of my history with Prince. I know Altaz hadn't listened to Prince that much, but I'm sure that obviously he has heard some songs here and there, maybe on the radio or in some films and stuff before this. But now I will ask Altaz what he thought of this album.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the album. But I think my experience with this album, like you, needs to go in that kind of the context of, so growing up, obviously I'm growing up at a time where obviously Prince is very big, MJ is big, Madonna's big, George Michael's big, like, and in general I never was that into Prince. Like he did, like his music never attracted or appealed to me. Although I knew how much people like loved him. Um, for me, when I was young, I loved When Doves Cry. That was the Prince song I absolutely loved. Just the sonics of it, the themes in it, everything. I just loved it as a kid. And then, of course, the Tim Burton Batman movie came out, and then you had Prince's famous song in there, Bat Dance, which I really liked. And then I really like this one song that's on this album, You Got the Look. But generally, I didn't pay much attention to Prince. And then even when you recommended this album, when I first listened to it, to be honest, and that's why even when I discuss in the films too, that I've just seen something once, so that doesn't isn't sufficient for me to say, it's for me, it's not for me. I may not have connected with it, but that's just once. It's in music, you get the privilege of listening to it a few times. So when I first listened to this album, um, I was a bit like, maybe this album is for like supreme lovers like SJS and Tony, or Vulgarian Troglodyte and Tony. It's for those supreme lovers. I'm just not one of them. And it's so weird. And that's the first time I'm listening to it. And the second time I put it on, I absolutely loved it. Like I was like, this is just so great. This is so great. Like, um, it just it connected, and then I could see, oh, like I can see why he's such an adored artist. Uh, all the praises. So I really, really like this album. I think it's a great album, and like you said, each time it gets better and better. So I can see its high score. Um, the only thing I would say is that in this album, because he's really showing his range, it is more like those streaming albums we see today where there's a lot of music, but not like those streaming albums because they're not great like this one. This is great. So the challenge will be thematically. It may not be a thematically connected album, but it's a great album. Um, and there's a lot of range. I mean, an incredible amount of range, like you said, going through all the different genres, and just the music in it, the composition in it, even the sonics. Uh, yeah, and favorite songs. I mean, The Cross is so great. You Got the Look is a great like kind of pop smash. Starfish and Coffee. Uh, what else? Even Ballad of Dorothy Parker, the first one, Sign of the Times. I mean, there's just so many great. Slow Love. If I Was Your Girlfriend is really great too. Uh, and of course, you said Adore and all that. So yeah, I don't know. Like, there's too many. It's all great.
Yeah, I think I love Adore the most because it has that kind of classic soul
Yeah.
sound to it, and I can love soul music a lot. But I think it was surprisingly difficult for me to get into Prince at first. Again, like I said, I kind of liked it at first, and I kind of understood why it was so great. But I think I had certain problems with some of his music, and I still do have some problems with again the kind of how some of the things here sound sonically, and like I mentioned earlier, the drum machine I have like it sounds a bit dated to me, and it has that kind of very dry
Mm.
sound, and but that's often what we criticize in 80s music in general, that some of the drum sounds don't sound that good anymore. But I think here we can especially see it in certain moments that it sounds a bit dated, but I mean it's just a very small thing in the end. I think it really fits the music, and I actually, even though it's an 80-minute long album, I do like every single song in this one, even though they are so different. And you mentioned Starfish and Coffee, like I've had that stuck in my head the whole morning and last night. Like, it's obviously, I think it's the shortest song. It's like just below 3 minutes, but it's such a fun pop song, very catchy. And then The Sign of the Times has that kind of classic beat with that kind of
Mhm.
weird kind of synthesizer in top of it, that I think I've heard that in some movies and TV shows as well, and makes you think about, I don't know, like a police car or something, like driving down the
Yeah,
downtown, and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
that's kind of fun.
yeah, yeah.
And that obviously
Mhm.
I haven't like really looked at the lyrics that deeply because I think many of the lyrics, again, they aren't very interesting, like conceptually or lyrically. But I think Sign of the Times is one of the songs that speaks more like socially conscious and stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, and at first, even Starfish and Coffee, when I heard it, I was like, "Oh, it sounds kind of a bit juvenile, right?" And then actually paid attention to the song, and it's actually about childhood wonder, right? It's about this girl and when they're young and they still have their imagination, and it's like, oh, every time I'd ask her what you have for breakfast and she'd say starfish, and so it's like very catchy. And like you said, in that the drum is very distinct, but I do like what they do with the drum because it's that reverse drum sound. So I think what's interesting in this album is you see a lot of influences that in hip hop music, like how a lot of the sound was then used in hip hop music, and Prince is like well respected in hip hop. So there's some songs that the production is like you can see the kind of techniques that Timbaland uses in his production. Some of the even the talking and the sounds, and so I found that really interesting how much he has inspired his music has inspired. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think some of the, yeah, like you said, really slow R&B. Yeah, I think the lyrics are not something that are super interesting in those kinds of tracks, but there are some interesting things going on. Like if I was your girlfriend, I mean that's a really interesting thing with the um, how it is with the guitar and the bass, the slide guitar or whatever it is, that sound, and then him singing in this very androgynous way. So I think it's a very interesting song, but obviously it's gonna feel still like in lyrics a bit dated based on where we're at today with kind of looking at gender relations and stuff like that. So, but still, it's a great album, very path breaking, very eclectic, like you said.
And the range of his vocals here is very interesting as well. We have those kind of almost like rapping and those kind of spoken vocals. Then we have those kind of quite maybe a little like quirky, fun, like tongue-in-cheek type of vocals. And then we have the crazy falsetto and stuff, which I really enjoy. And of course, we often kind of compare Prince and Michael Jackson together. And I like both myself a lot. I think Michael Jackson is easier to get into. It's kind of a bit more immediate, but I think Prince doesn't have. I mean, Michael Jackson has a better voice, I think, than Prince, but I mean, he had a better voice than pretty much anybody. So that's a pretty hard comparison to make. But I think Prince, as an overall artist, is greater because again he played many instruments. He wrote these songs himself, then he sang on them and took part in the production and everything. So he was kind of a very multi-talented person, like I said in the introduction, that he was able to do so many things himself, even though he had these like huge grandiose visions, but he was able to get there.
Yeah, it's like in some ways when you think about track by track, it's such a curious album. Like you have I Was Your Girlfriend, and then you have this song, the Cross, which like in a way doesn't go along with anything in the album, but then it just kind of works. And then right after Cross is like this, it's going to be a beautiful night, very upbeat, like party, like groove, like funk. So it's really curious. Like it's really curious, and if you flow with it, it works. But if you really think about it, you're like, how does that work? But it just does. Yeah. So I think yes, I'll be listening to more Prince now. Now that I kind of really starting to get what Prince is or was.
And the beginning of the album is interesting too. Sign of the Times has that beat, but then it goes to this song that's like very blues, kind of rock and roll type of song with this interesting groove. So we can immediately see the eclecticism of this album, how the first two tracks are already so different from each other.
Yeah, exactly.
And then one can argue whether the first half or the second half is better. I mean, it's hard to say. Just, I mean, both halves are really good. Like I said earlier, I like all the songs here. I guess if I had a gun to my head, I might say that the second half I like it slightly more.
Same.
But, yeah.
Same. I would take the second half. If I had to absolutely choose, then I'd say yes, second half. It's the second half that got me understanding the first half. because it was like the first time I heard it, of course I was like, not, I was kind of lukewarm on it. Then listen again, I started liking more, but the second half on my second listen was so strong, and then I kept listening to the second half, and then I went back to the beginning, and then I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it now. So the second half definitely for me was stronger initially, but then the other side came up, and now it's almost even. Yeah.
Many people say that again, this might even be the best album of the 80s. I mean, there are stuff that I like more. Again, there's even a bit small relation with Prince to Madonna's Like a Prayer, because the song has a bit of, I think, Prince's guitar playing in it, and I think they were supposed to work together more on that album or something. But yeah, Like a Prayer these days is like very high up there for me in my 80s rankings, and then there are many other albums as well from the 80s that I really love. So
Yeah, there are too many great albums in the 80s. So, well, while if someone put that at the top, I wouldn't be mad at it, but I just think there's so many albums in the 80s.
Yeah.
And great ones. So I don't know if you could. I don't know. You'd have to go through all the top ones again. Let's not forget things like Depeche Mode and stuff all in there. Let's not forget the Pet Shop Boys. Let's not forget there's a lot in the 80s.
Although with Depeche Mode, I think their best album came out in just after the 80s, 1990, Violators.
Yeah, that's true though. Yeah, that's true. The Violator is their best album. Yeah, so.
But I think with the 80s, there are lots of great is like very popular albums, but also there are some like hidden gems in the decade as well. So there's, I mean, obviously there's Thriller, but again, I'm one of the people who likes Off the Wall, which came out in the 70s more than Thriller. And I know Tony agrees with me as well. And I've kind of seen lately that there are more and more critics and people all the time who like Off the Wall more than Thriller, actually, because of course it used to be always Thriller, but I see like a significant minority now that says Off the Wall. But yeah.
Well, I also think it's because Off the Wall, if you listen to Off the Wall, and if you listen to Pharrell, and if you listen to Pharrell and the Neptunes and his production, Off the Wall's production style is much more used in today's pop music. So I think like there's a greater familiarity, whereas in it's like Thriller is like this untouched, and then it was too big. So I think like things can take away from that. When something is too big after a while, people will start kind of being like, oh no, not Citizen Kane, Magnificent Ambersons. It's like that's what's gonna start happening. So it just gets too big. Like, and I'm not saying Off the Wall is inferior, but I'm just saying, yeah, I can see that. But I like Off the Wall side A. The B sides there are a few that are a bit too, I don't know. They're just kind of like cheesy. So that, but I don't know. You know what it is. But yeah, sometimes even we listen to someone later, Michael Jackson, he did some great stuff after too, even on Dangerous and stuff. So, it's all opinion.
Yeah.
That Off the Wall first night, whew.
Yeah.
It's insane.
And I think disco kind of gets a bad rep for, like, it shouldn't get a bad rep. I think I like disco a lot, and even some of the disco revival stuff of today. So,
yeah. And disco is great for inclusion. I mean, so for identity inclusion, like disco really pushed that. So I think it's like disco is one of those things that, oh, disco sucks, and there was that whole movement. But then when you think about modern pop and modern pop production, like where is disco like factors in everything? So even now what you listen to, like disco factors into it. So did disco ever die? I think disco like kind of transmuted, and then it's going to live forever essentially.
But I'm glad that I'm glad that you like this album, and I really enjoyed also listening to it a lot.
Yeah, sign of the times, baby. Peace.
Yeah. And it's rare for this long of an album to be like very consistent. I think, for example, with the hip hop albums that are this length often have like couple tracks that should be taken out of the album, but this one I think is fine as it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't remove anything. I agree.
Yeah. But anyway, next time we will gonna do one of the other greatest album of all time candidates. So it's Stevie Wonder's Inner Visions, which is always in the top hundreds as well. Sometimes even in top 10, and it's such a great soul album, kind of the timeless stuff, and that's like came out early 70s, but that actually doesn't sound dated at all. It still sounds so great. So really love that one.
Yeah, I look forward to it. Stevie Wonder's another artist that I haven't really listened to that deeply, or so I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's hard with these type of albums to kind of add anything to the conversation because they've been discussed to death, but I think it's still great to celebrate them as these are so great for a reason, and it's not just stupid hype or anything, but they are actually really good albums.
Yeah.
And this is one of those, one final thing is that, again, this is one of those albums that you could show to a person who says that all pop music is stupid, and you could show this album and show that there is so much ambition in pop music and so many different elements that you can use in pop music as well. So
yeah, absolutely. In 80s, I mean 80s pop, there's a lot of great pop, so it's like, yeah. So yeah, you can't say it's all stupid or anything like that, for sure.
yeah, so people go listen to Prince and definitely listen to Madonna, especially like a Freya album. I never get tired of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen to all Madonna.
I still have some stuff to go, but yeah, it is a good thing. So yeah.
Yeah, they were playing some Madonna at BFI. Papa Don't Preach and stuff. I was like, yeah, okay. This music is like kind of coming alive again. So
And that album is worth listening to as well. That has Papa Don't Preach and La Isla Bonita, True Blues from the mid 80s. So.
True Blue, yeah. True. Oh man.
But anyway, enough for the Madonna fanboying.
Yeah, I love Madonna too. So I'll go crazy too. I love Madonna, yeah.
Tony has to always listen to me go on and on about her. So yeah. Her and Kylie Minogue for me, the two pop divas. So, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't listened to a lot of Kylie, but yeah, Madonna for me was always huge.
Yeah, I find one more thing is that I've kind of, like if I get into a better financial position at some point where I can like put more money into decorating my home, I'm gonna have like a shrine where I have these pop diva like vinyls like in the wall and maybe color the wall like pink or something and make it look like all over the top. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah. Very cool. I hope that happens.
Yeah. And I mean, it wouldn't be that expensive, just some paint and some vinyl. So I mean, I'm sure I can do that even if I stay relatively poor. Yeah. But anyway. But let's hope that I win the lottery soon. So yeah. And now stop the rambling and yeah. Thanks for watching. Let us know your thoughts. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.